Welcome to Backstage Melody, where today we uncover the untold story behind Steve Perry's heartbreaking exit from Journey. He had the voice that defined a generation. Then he vanished. No warning, no goodbye. Why did Steve Perry, the heart of Journey, walk away at the peak of fame? The real reason was never about music. It was betrayal. It was heartbreak, and it nearly destroyed him. The meteoric rise, but pressure builds. When Steve Perry joined Journey in 1977, it wasn't just a lineup change, it was a complete rebirth. Before Perry, Journey was a solid but struggling fusion band, musically complex but lacking a breakout sound. They had talent, they had ambition, but they didn't have a voice that could stop time. That changed the moment Perry stepped up to the mic. His voice was unreal, soaring, soulful, and razor sharp. The kind of voice that could sell out arenas and cut through any radio frequency. Overnight, Journey transformed from a rock experiment to one of the most iconic arena rock bands in America. Hits started pouring in. Lights, Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin', Any Way You Want It, and of course, Don't Stop Believin'. They weren't just songs, they were anthems. And at the center of it all was Perry, dubbed the Voice for a reason. His sound could lift you up and rip your heart out in the same breath. He wasn't just singing, he was bleeding emotion into every line. But success came with a darker price tag. The faster the band rose, the more Perry became a prisoner of his own gift. He wasn't just the lead singer, he was Journey in the eyes of millions. The expectations were suffocating. His perfectionism pushed him to rehearse endlessly, terrified of letting anyone down. Even off stage, the pressure didn't stop. Label execs, producers, and managers constantly leaned on him to deliver more hits, more tours, more energy. He once described it like living in a bubble, surrounded by people, yet completely isolated. Behind the smiles and sold-out shows, Perry was burning out. And the cracks weren't just internal, they started spreading through the band. Neil Schon and the others had built Journey long before Perry arrived. But now, with Perry as the star attraction, the power dynamic has shifted. And as we'll see next, that shift was about to trigger a series of conflicts that would quietly tear the band apart. Control versus collaboration. Cracks appear. As Journey's fame skyrocketed, so did the tension. On stage, they looked like a unified force. Tight harmonies, electric solos, flawless performances. But backstage, it was a slow-building storm. At the heart of the conflict was a simple, dangerous question. Who was really in control? Steve Perry, now the undeniable face of the band, had his own artistic vision. He gravitated towards soulful ballads, emotional storytelling, and slicker pop melodies. Songs like Open Arms and Faithfully were pure Perry, intimate, soaring, drenched in emotion. But that wasn't the direction everyone else wanted. Neil Schon, the band's co-founder and guitarist, was a rock purist. He wanted edge, grit, and a harder sound. Schon believed Journey's foundation was rooted in fusion and rock, not love songs and top 40 ballads. To him, Perry was turning Journey into a soft rock brand. To Perry, Schon was holding the band back from reaching its full emotional potential. That creative divide widened fast. Perry began taking a more dominant role in the studio, shaping songs, influencing production, even pushing back on arrangements. Meanwhile, band members started to feel like passengers on a train Perry was driving alone. The final straw came during the making of Raised on Radio in 1986. For the first time, Perry was the de facto producer. And with that power, he made brutal decisions, firing bassist Ross Valerie and drummer Steve Smith from the project. It wasn't personal, he claimed, it was about sound. But to the rest of the band, it felt like a coup. Perry later admitted he felt immense pressure from Columbia Records to keep the hits coming. The label had invested heavily. They wanted results, and they wanted him to deliver. So while Journey was still climbing the charts, internally, they were cracking wide open. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about pride, control, and resentment. And Perry? He was starting to feel like the loneliest man in a band of 5. But what happened next would hit harder than any artistic feud, and it had nothing to do with music. Tragedy hits, the personal toll. By 1986, Journey was still topping charts, but Steve Perry was unraveling behind the scenes. He was no longer just clashing over creative control, he was carrying something far heavier. His mother, Mary Perry, had fallen seriously ill. And for Steve, she wasn't just family, she was his moral compass, his emotional anchor, the one person who kept him grounded amid the chaos of stardom. Throughout his rise, Mary had been quietly cheering him on, reminding him to stay humble, stay kind, and stay true to himself. But now, she was fading, and Perry couldn't pretend anymore. While Journey was preparing for the Raised on Radio tour, Perry made a decision that shocked management. He put the brakes on everything. He left rehearsals, stopped recording, and went home. He wanted to be by her side, not on stage, not in the spotlight, not shaking hands with record execs. This wasn't just a scheduling conflict, it was a full emotional fracture. To some in the industry, it looked like Perry was self-sabotaging, but to those close to him, it was clear. He was finally drawing a line between Steve Perry, the brand, and Steve Perry, the son. When Mary passed, everything shifted. Perry later described the moment as life-altering. He said he felt hollow. Number. The music that once gave him purpose suddenly felt distant. Touring seemed pointless. The industry's demands, interviews, press, rehearsals, felt like noise. Grief doesn't just hurt, it reshapes you. And for Steve Perry, it was the beginning of a transformation. He started pulling away, not just from the band, but from the entire machine around him. He canceled interviews, missed meetings. Even his bandmates couldn't get a read on him. And while Journey pressed on, Steve was quietly, painfully slipping out the side door. He wouldn't say it out loud yet, but in his heart, he was already gone. The injury that changed everything. By the mid-1990s, the world had changed, and so had Steve Perry. After years away from the limelight, Journey fans were buzzing with hope. Maybe, just maybe, the voice would return. And for a moment, it looked like he would. The band had reunited. Perry was back in the studio. They were even working on new material. There was talk of a world tour, a full-blown Journey comeback. But fate had other plans. While vacationing in Hawaii, Perry decided to take a hike, an ordinary, peaceful activity for someone trying to reconnect with life outside the music industry. But somewhere along the trail, he took a wrong step. He collapsed. The pain in his hip was instant and severe. Doctors later confirmed it. He had a degenerative bone condition. If he wanted to walk without pain, let alone tour, he needed immediate hip surgery. But Steve Perry wasn't ready. Not emotionally, not physically. He was still grieving, still healing from years of burnout. And now, once again, the machine started pressuring him. The band, eager to tour and capitalize on the comeback hype, gave Perry an ultimatum. Get the surgery, or they'd move forward without him. Plain and cold, no grace period, no negotiation. For Perry, it was a knife to the heart. He felt blindsided, betrayed by the very people he once considered brothers. To him, it wasn't just about the surgery. It was about trust, loyalty, and being treated like a human instead of a product. He later said, "I couldn't believe they'd do that after everything we'd been through." Instead of rushing into the operating room, Perry went silent. And when he didn't meet the deadline, Journey replaced him with Steve Augury, a talented vocalist, but not Steve Perry. It was the final break. And although the band would continue without him, something vital was lost that day. Not just a frontman, but the emotional heart of Journey. From the outside, it looked like a professional decision. But to Perry, it felt like abandonment. And from that moment on, he never looked back. Ego, loyalty, and silence. Why he never came back. Steve Perry didn't slam the door shut. He didn't announce a breakup. He didn't even say goodbye. He just disappeared. No dramatic headlines, no explosive interviews, just distance, silence, and a lingering question. Would he ever come back? Journey moved forward without him, releasing albums and touring with new vocalists. To the public, it seemed like just another band evolution. But to Perry, it felt like betrayal. He later described the separation as a painful divorce with no closure. Not because he was bitter, but because of how cold it all felt. Years of brotherhood, laughter, and musical magic, replaced by business decisions and ultimatums. He wasn't angry at the new singer. He wasn't even angry at the fans, but he was hurt, deeply. In interviews years later, Perry admitted that the break wasn't just about the hip surgery. It was about respect and the lack of it. He said he felt like the band had become a corporation, where decisions were made not from the heart, but from spreadsheets, where music took a backseat to logistics, where friendship is lost to deadlines. And after everything he gave, the voice, the face, the soul of the band, he felt like he was cast aside when he needed support the most. So he walked away, not with rage, not with revenge, but with silence. He never sued, never dragged anyone through the mud. He just moved on. But the silence spoke louder than any tabloid headline ever could. Because when someone as passionate and private as Perry chooses not to speak, it means the wound runs deeper than words. The fans begged for a reunion. But Steve, he had already made peace with leaving the stage behind. To him, going back wasn't just about singing again. It meant stepping back into a world that had once crushed him. And as we'll see next, when the spotlight came calling again, Perry had a very different answer. The comeback that never was. For over 2 decades, Steve Perry lived in the shadows of his own legend. He didn't tour, he didn't record, he didn't even sing. Every now and then someone would spot him at a baseball game, or quietly slipping into a concert crowd. But publicly, he was gone. And yet, his name never disappeared. Every year the questions resurfaced. Will he rejoin Journey? Will he ever sing again? Even his former bandmates left the door open, publicly at least. Then came 2017. Journey was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Fans held their breath. Would this be the moment? Would Perry finally return to the stage and sing Don't Stop Believin' one more time? He did show up. He smiled, he waved, he even delivered a warm, heartfelt speech, thanking the fans, his former bandmates, and the people who never gave up on him. For a split second, it felt like old times. But then, he stepped aside. He didn't perform. He didn't join the band on stage. And just like that, the dream reunion vanished again. Some thought he was being stubborn. Others said it was pride. But Perry later revealed the real reason he wasn't ready, emotionally or vocally. The idea of stepping back into Journey, even for one night, felt like opening a door he had long since closed. But that didn't mean he had stopped making music. In 2018, something miraculous happened. Out of nowhere, Perry released a solo album, Traces, his first in over 24 years. It wasn't a power rock comeback. It was something else entirely, soft, stripped down, emotional, and deeply personal. Songs like No Erasin and We're Still Here weren't about radio play. They were about healing. He didn't tour. He didn't chase the spotlight. He just wanted to reconnect with the part of himself that loved music, without the pressure, without the business, without the baggage. And in doing so, Perry reminded the world, he didn't need a comeback tour to matter. He just needed to be heard again. The real reason, in his own words. For decades, fans, journalists, and even his own bandmates speculated, why did Steve Perry really leave? Was it ego? Was it a burnout? Was it grief? The truth is more personal than any tabloid ever printed, and Steve finally shared it himself. In multiple rare interviews following the release of Traces, Perry opened up about his decision to disappear. And what he revealed wasn't dramatic, it was human. He said the passion was gone, not the love for music, but the joy of performing under pressure. The spotlight didn't excite him anymore, it drained him. He admitted he was afraid that returning too soon would cost him the person he'd finally become. After years of therapy, soul-searching, and healing, he had found a version of himself he actually liked, a quieter man, a simpler life. He explained it like this: if I went back, I knew I might lose myself again, and I couldn't risk that. I had to protect the spark, the very thing that made me want to sing in the first place. Perry wasn't running from fame. He was running toward peace. He'd seen what the industry could do to people. He felt how fast it could devour your identity. The price of a golden voice. Steve Perry's voice could fill stadiums. But in the end, it was the silence that defined his legacy. He didn't just leave Journey. He left behind an industry that tried to control him, mold him, and push him past the breaking point. He gave us the soundtrack to our lives, then chose peace over praise. He reminded us that real courage isn't always found under the lights. Sometimes, it's found in walking away when the world expects you to stay. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps more people discover the truth behind the music. Subscribe to Backstage Melody for more untold stories, emotional journeys, and legends who left their mark and walked their own path. And tell us in the comments, what does Steve Perry's story mean to you? Because behind every voice, there's a story waiting to be heard.